In this week's Parshat Tzav, the Meshech Chochmah Rabbi Meir Simcha of Dvinsk has a fascinating insight into a few words in the Parsha, a contrast that we would very easily miss, but he didn't. When contrasting two of the different offerings that are brought by a Yisrael, brought by a regular Jew, and parts of them are offered on the altar, the rest is then consumed by the Kohanim. And the two offerings that we're speaking about, one is a chatat, a sin offering. Let's say that somebody does a very serious sin with some kind of accident, not completely beyond their control, but an example would be that they cut their nails on Shabbat, not knowing that they were not allowed to cut their nails on Shabbat. So then you would bring a chatat, you would bring the sin offering. And that would be an animal that you would bring. It would be shechted, parts of the animal would go up on the altar, and then the rest of the animal would be eaten by the Kohanim. Another offering which has a similar form to it is the mincha offering. Now we refer to mincha, in our language we refer to the afternoon prayer, but that's not the technical term for mincha. The afternoon prayer technically would be called tfilat bein harvayim, the afternoon prayer, whereas the mincha was a flour offering, essentially some kind of thick matzah. Maybe think of it a little bit like pitta. You have different kinds of mincha, but this kind of thick matzah that was brought, the Kohen would take some of that matzah and offer it on the altar, and the rest again would be eaten by the Kohanim. But now listen to this. The way in which the Torah tells us the Kohanim will eat it is different in each case. In the case of the chatat, it says, HaKohen ha'mechateota yochlena. The Kohen who offers the offering will eat it. And then it says, Kol zachar b'kohanim yochalota. Every male Kohen, in other words, every Kohen who's engaged in the Beit HaMikdash can eat it. Whereas when it comes to the mincha, it says, Vanotered mimena, and what remains after you've offered some of it on the altar, yochlu Aaron uvanav. Aaron and his sons will eat. So when it comes to the chatat, the animal sacrifice, it says the one who offers it will eat, and the other Kohanim. Whereas when it comes to the flour offering, it says the sons of Aaron will eat it, implying that if the Kohen who offered it does not want to feel like eating it for whatever reason, he would be within his rights to turn that down, yet not with the chatat. So the Meshech Chochmah explains with a fascinating idea, and we'll focus on how he expresses his idea here, and then also some general lessons or messages on it. He says there have always been those who criticized the service of the korbanot because it is not sterile. You know what I mean? When we really think about what's involved here in animal sacrifice, I mean, there's blood and guts and viscera and organs and cutting open animals and burning them. It's something that's very disturbing to many people, especially vegetarians. It's something that people can really grapple with. In fact, the notes he records from the Ramban, and the notes here in the volume that I've got expand on it, is that there was in fact a Catholic priest who came to the Rambam, and he said, our religion, Christianity, is much better because we're not interested in animal sacrifice anymore, whereas you guys are still praying for its return. And it's a thing that I think especially today bothers a lot of people. And so we can imagine, says the Meshech Chochmah, and especially to put it even further, a person sins, an animal must die. Why must the animal suffer for what you've done wrong? So today we're not going to deal with that question. It's a good question. We've dealt with it in other contexts. Maybe we'll look at it again sometime, but that's not our question today. Today what we're going to say is, this is a question, yet nonetheless, it's a mitzvah. This is a commandment that God has given us. And there is a time and a place to sit and discuss and debate and to work it out. But at the time of the service in the Beit HaMikdash, one's intention has to be unified, clearly directed, without hesitation or reticence. In fact, he says, if a person at the time that he is offering the sacrifice stops and thinks to himself, I'm not really sure, should I, shouldn't I? If that's what you're doing at the time, he says the sacrifice is disqualified. Even if you've decided to go ahead with it, even if you do it, even if you do it technically perfectly, even if you have in mind what the sacrifice is, but if you're in two minds as to whether what you're doing is right, the sacrifice is actually disqualified. And so he says you might have somebody who's offering up the sacrifice, but having some kind of hesitation or doubt, and therefore they'll say, you know what, I won't eat from it personally, I will give the other Kohanim to eat from it. No good? Can't do that. If you're going to offer the sacrifice, you eat from it. Another example he gives of this is there's a section in Shulchan Aruch discussing whether rabbis halachically can be paid or not. So again, it's another discussion, but the case is, a woman comes in with a big pot of chicken soup. And she's got the chicken soup and some milk spilled into it, and how much milk, and she's not sure, and was the milk watered down, and did it land on meat or straight into the soup? There's all kinds of halachic questions we can look at over here. And so, let's say the rabbi goes through this whole thing, and he comes out and he says, you know what, it's kosher. So, can she write him a check for 1,000 rand? So the answer is no, she can't do that. But what she can do, and what is appropriate to do, is that as a way of saying thank you, she gives him a bowl of soup. So that is something the Meshech Chomer says is the same thing. Because, maybe he's saying, well, you know what, it's kind of almost kosher, it's kosher enough for you. Well, if it's kosher enough for her, my friend, then put your money where your mouth is, then eat it. In other words, in the time of theory, in the time of discussion, when you are working something out in your mind, you can have doubt. But when you're going to do it, you need to commit. That's the idea here. Now, coming back to the case that he gives with the animal offering. If you're going to be offering that animal offering, you're going to be eating it. With the flour offering, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, we're not worried about that the guy's a conscientious objector to the flour offering, to the bread offering. And so, therefore, if he doesn't want to eat, so he doesn't have to eat. We're not worried about expecting that kind of commitment. But I think this is such an important lesson, is that there are many times where fools rush in, where angels fear to tread, that people go straight ahead, guns blazing, and they are totally blithely confident about whatever they're doing. And really, they should stop and think. Really, they should ask themselves, is this really right? Am I really doing the right thing? Have I understood the situation correctly? You've got to have all of that. But when you now come to engage in the action, you need to have your mind at ease. You need to now commit to what you're doing. You can't be doing something that you've decided to do and yet second-guessing yourself. That's not going to be effective, and that's not fair to what you're doing. If you're doing it, put your heart and soul into it. I've seen this many times. People will say, I made the decision that I would do it, but I'm not sure if I should or I shouldn't. They're half in, half out. They're 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door. Not going to get anywhere like that. You need to work it out. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to be honest about the situation. But once you have made your decision, invest yourself completely in it and give it your all. So that's the idea, coming back again, when you're offering the chatat offering. So if you're not sure, if you're a conscientious objector, if you don't like this, if you haven't come to terms that this is what Hashem wants, so don't offer it. Right? So then don't come to the Beit HaMikdash. If you've made the decision, you know what? If this is what God says, God knows what's right and wrong. I don't understand it. I may have questions, but I accept that God knows what's doing. And you come in on that basis, then go all the way. Commit yourself, heart and soul. And through that, we will be aligning ourselves, making sure we're doing the right thing, but we will also achieve great things through our full commitment and involvement. Shabbat Shalom.